"Not until you know what home truly is," said the rancher, as she tried to run from the town. The town had a way of remembering things even when people tried to forget. It sat quietly between long stretches of land and open sky, the kind of place where dust settled slowly and stories lasted forever. For most people, it was home in the simplest sense. For her, it felt like a place that knew her too well. She had lived here almost all her life. The ranch was just outside town, surrounded by fences her father had built with his own hands many years ago. Every post, every gate, every worn path carried memories she did not ask for but could not escape. From early morning until late evening, she worked the land. She fed the animals, repaired broken boards, checked the water lines, and kept everything running. People in town respected her. Some admired her strength. Others whispered about her choices. No one ever asked how she truly felt. On the surface, her life looked steady. She paid her bills, kept her ranch alive, and rarely asked anyone for help. But inside, there was a quiet restlessness that never went away. It followed her through the fields and sat beside her during long nights. She often stood on her porch after sunset, staring at the horizon, wondering what life would feel like if she could just leave it all behind. The town felt small to her, not in size but in memory. Every corner reminded her of something she wanted to forget. The old store where she once laughed without worry. The school building where she learned how quickly dreams could change. The dirt road where she made promises she could not keep. Even the people, kind as many of them were, carried versions of her she no longer wanted to be. She did not hate the town. That was the hardest part to explain, even to herself. She simply felt stuck in it, like she was living the same day again and again. Each morning started the same way. Each evening ended with the same tired silence. She told herself that this was just how life worked, but deep down she knew she wanted more. Not more money or attention, just more space to breathe. The idea of leaving did not come all at once. It started quietly, like a thought she pushed away whenever it appeared. Then it began to return more often. She would imagine waking up somewhere new, where no one knew her history, where her name did not come with a story attached to it. A place where she could introduce herself without feeling like she had to explain anything. Late one evening, after a long day of work, she made the decision she had been avoiding. She stood in her bedroom, looking around at the familiar walls, and realized she did not feel anything anymore. No comfort, no warmth, just familiarity. That night, she pulled an old suitcase from the closet and placed it on the bed. The simple action made her heart race. She did not rush. She folded her clothes carefully, choosing only what she needed. Each item brought back a memory, but she forced herself to keep going. A jacket she wore during cold mornings. A shirt from a town festival she barely remembered enjoying. She placed them all into the suitcase, as if packing pieces of her life into something she could finally carry away. Outside, the ranch was quiet. The animals settled down for the night, unaware that anything was about to change. She walked through the property one last time before sleep, checking the gates and fences like she always did. Her boots pressed into the dirt she knew by heart. For a moment, she wondered if the land would miss her. Then she shook the thought away. Land did not miss people. People missed land. The town had a habit of watching without speaking. Even when no one was around, she felt seen. She kept her plans to herself, knowing that once word got out, it would spread faster than she could stop it. Questions would come, advice she did not ask for, warnings she was tired of hearing. She wanted to leave quietly, without explanations. That night, sleep did not come easily. She lay awake, listening to the sounds she had heard her whole life. The wind against the windows, the distant call of animals, the faint hum of silence. Instead of comfort, these sounds made her feel heavier. She wondered if she was doing the right thing. Then she reminded herself that staying had never felt right either. By morning, the decision felt solid. She made coffee and drank it slowly, standing by the window. The sky was clear, painted in soft colors that usually made her pause and smile. Today, she did not stop to admire it. She focused on what came next. The road, the distance, the unknown. She planned to leave before noon. Enough time to take care of the essentials, not enough time for second thoughts. As she stepped outside, the town seemed calm, almost unaware of her plan. A neighbor drove by and waved. She waved back, forcing a small smile. The gesture felt heavier than it should have. As she loaded her suitcase into her truck, she felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that she was finally doing something for herself. Guilt for leaving behind a life she had worked so hard to build. She reminded herself that walking away did not erase the effort she put in. It only meant she was choosing something different. The ranch stood quietly behind her, unchanged and patient. It had seen people come and go before. It would survive without her, she told herself. Still, she lingered for a moment. resting her hand on the fence. The wood was rough and familiar beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if trying to store the feeling for later. She did not know exactly where she was going. She only knew she was going somewhere else, somewhere without history pressing against her shoulders. Somewhere she could start again, even if she did not yet know how. As she climbed into the truck, she avoided looking back. She had learned that looking back made leaving harder. The engine started, and the sound broke the quiet morning. With one last breath, she pulled onto the road that led away from the ranch and toward town, knowing that once she passed through it, everything would change. The town watched her go, just as it had watched her grow, struggle, and endure. She did not see it, but the place she was running from held more of her than she realized. And even as she drove forward, something unseen held her back. Not with force, but with memory. She believed leaving was the answer. She believed distance would bring peace. What she did not yet know was that the town was not just a place she lived in. It was a part of her story, waiting patiently for her to understand what she was really trying to escape. She had not planned to stop in town that morning. The idea was to drive straight through, past the familiar streets, and leave everything behind without slowing down. But habits are hard to break, especially ones formed over a lifetime. Without thinking too much, she turned toward the main road that led past the feed store and the old fields. The town was already awake. A few trucks were parked outside shops. Someone swept dust from a doorway. Life moved on, steady and calm, unaware of the quiet storm inside her. She kept her eyes forward, hands tight on the steering wheel, telling herself she would not stop, just pass through. Just one last look. That was when she saw him. He stood near the edge of the field, leaning on a fence post like he had done 1,000 times before. His hat was pulled low, his shirt faded from years of sun and work. He was older now, slower in his movements, but there was nothing weak about him. He had been ranching long before she took her first steps, long before the land felt heavy on her shoulders. She considered driving past him. She almost did. But something in her chest tightened, and before she could argue with herself, she slowed the truck and pulled over. The engine went quiet, leaving only the sound of wind brushing across dry grass. He looked up, as if he had been expecting her. "Well," he said calmly, stepping closer, "you're up early. Long day ahead." He glanced at the truck, at the way it sat slightly lower in the back. He did not comment on it right away. He never rushed words. That was one of the things people respected about him. "You heading somewhere?" he asked gently. Lying felt wrong, but telling the truth felt heavier. "Just going for a drive," she said. He studied her face, not in a way that felt uncomfortable, but with the quiet understanding of someone who had seen many people try to run from something they could not name. He nodded slowly. "Mind if I walk with you a bit?" he asked, already turning toward the fence line. She parked the truck and stepped out, unsure why she was agreeing. Maybe part of her wanted someone to notice. Maybe she wanted one last moment of being understood without explanation. They walked side by side along the fence. The ground was uneven but familiar. She had walked these paths many times, sometimes with him, sometimes alone. The silence between them was not awkward. It felt earned. "I heard you've been quiet lately," he said after a while, "even quieter than usual." She gave a small smile. "Didn't know that was possible." He chuckled softly. "Everything is possible if you give it time." He rested his arms on the wood and looked out across the land. She followed his gaze. The field stretched wide and open, the same as it always had. To some, it was just land. To others, it was life itself. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly, surprising even herself. He did not answer right away. He took his time, the way he always did. "I did," he said finally. "Once." That caught her attention. She turned toward him. "Really?" He nodded. "A long time ago. I thought if I left, things would make more sense. Thought I could outrun the parts of myself I didn't like." And I learned something," he said. "You can leave a place, but you don't leave yourself behind." She looked away, focusing on the ground, afraid he was seeing too much. "I don't belong here anymore," she said. "Everywhere I go, I feel like I'm carrying things I don't want." He looked at her then, really looked. "Belonging isn't about comfort," he said. "It's about knowing who you are, even when it's hard." She shook her head. "This place only reminds me of mistakes. This place reminds you of effort, of staying when it would have been easier to quit." She laughed without humor. "Staying doesn't always mean strength." "No," he agreed, "but neither does running." She straightened, a bit defensive. "I'm not running." He raised his hand slightly, calm and open. "I didn't say you were. I said running doesn't always mean strength. They stood in silence again. A bird flew overhead. The town felt close, even from here, like it was listening. You know, he said gently. People think home is just a place, 4 walls, a piece of land. But it's not that simple. She waited. Home is where you stop fighting who you are, he continued. Not until you know what home truly is will leaving give you what you're looking for. The words settled deep, stirring something she did not want to feel. They sounded too true, too close. She frowned. So you think I should stay? He shook his head. I think you should understand why you want to go. I want a fresh start. A fresh start doesn't come from distance, he said softly. It comes from clarity. She felt frustrated then, like he was blocking the only door she saw open. You don't know what it's like to feel stuck, she said. His eyes softened. I do. That's why I'm talking to you. She did not want to cry. Not here. Not now. I've given this place everything, she said. And it still feels like it's taking from me, he nodded. That happens when you forget to take care of yourself. They walked back toward her truck. The conversation felt unfinished, but heavy enough already. He stopped a few steps away and tipped his hat. Wherever you go, he said, go honest. Don't expect the road to fix what you haven't faced. I appreciate your concern. He smiled gently. I always will. As she started the engine, she glanced at him one last time. He stood there, calm and steady, like the land itself. As she drove away, his words followed her, not loudly, not forcefully. They simply stayed, repeating in the quiet spaces between her thoughts. Not until you know what home truly is. She tightened her grip on the wheel and kept driving, telling herself she didn't believe him. But deep down, something had already shifted. And though she did not stop or turn around, she could no longer pretend the question hadn't been asked. What was she really running from? The road stretched ahead of her like a promise that refused to explain itself. Mile after mile passed under her tires, and with every turn the town faded further into the distance. At first, that distance felt good. The tight feeling in her chest loosened just a little. She rolled down the window and let the wind rush in, carrying away the dust and the familiar smells she had known all her life. She told herself this was freedom. The first few hours were easy. She played the radio, changed stations, then turned it off completely. Silence felt better than noise. She liked the way the road hummed beneath the truck, steady and sure. No one knew her here. No one expected anything from her. The thought made her smile for the first time in days. She stopped at a small roadside place just before sunset. It was nothing special, just a counter, a few tables, and a tired-looking sign outside. She ordered food, sat alone, and watched strangers come and go. No one looked twice at her. No one asked questions. It was exactly what she wanted. That night, she stayed in a modest room with thin walls and a flickering light. As she lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, she waited for the deep sense of relief she thought would come. She had left. She had finally done it. This should have felt like the start of something new. But instead, her thoughts grew louder. In the quiet, memories crept in. Not the heavy ones she expected, but small moments she hadn't thought about in years. Early mornings on the ranch, when the air was cool and the world felt untouched. The way the land looked after rain. The sound of her boots on familiar ground. She turned onto her side, annoyed at herself. You're just tired, she whispered into the dark. The next morning, she continued driving. She didn't have a clear destination, just a general direction and enough money to keep going for a while. She told herself she would know where to stop when she felt it. That feeling never came. Days passed. She crossed into places she had never been before. New towns, new faces, new roads. On the surface, everything was different. But inside, she felt the same weight she carried back home. Followed her into diners, gas stations, and quiet parking lots where she rested for the night. She met people along the way. Kind people. Curious people. They asked simple questions. Where are you from? What do you do? She answered carefully, keeping things short. Saying, I run a ranch felt strange here, like it belonged to someone else. Without the land beneath her feet, the words felt empty. One afternoon, she stopped near a wide-open field that reminded her too much of home. The grass moved gently in the wind, and the sky seemed endless. She sat on the hood of her truck and watched for a long time. Instead of comfort, the sight made her chest ache. She realized then that she hadn't escaped the town at all. She had only removed the background. The thoughts, the questions, the unfinished feelings, they were all still there, waiting for her to slow down. At night, sleep came in short pieces. She dreamed of fences she couldn't finish fixing, roads that circled back on themselves, voices calling her name from places she couldn't see. Each morning she woke up feeling restless and unsure. She tried to distract herself. She explored small shops, took longer routes, changed her appearance slightly, as if that might help. But nothing filled the quiet space inside her. It was like carrying a suitcase she could never put down. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat alone again, watching shadows stretch across the ground. The rancher's words returned, uninvited, but steady. "You can leave a place, but you don't leave yourself behind." She exhaled slowly, admitting what she had been avoiding. He had been right. Distance had not silenced anything. It had only made the questions clearer. She thought about why she left. Not the reasons she told herself, but the real ones. The fear of staying exactly as she was. The fear of facing old pain without distraction. The fear of admitting that part of her still cared deeply about a place she claimed to be done with. Leaving had been easier than staying and sorting through those feelings. The road no longer felt like freedom. It felt like movement without direction. Instead, she slowed down. She stayed longer in one place, then another. She began to observe herself the way she observed new towns. Quietly, honestly. She noticed how her shoulders tightened when she thought about home, how her chest softened when she remembered moments of pride she rarely acknowledged. One night, sitting alone under a wide sky, she finally allowed herself to ask the question she had been avoiding. What if the problem wasn't the town? The thought scared her more than leaving ever had. If the place wasn't the problem, then the work she needed to do was inside herself. There would be no quick escape from that. She thought about the ranch, about the land she knew so well it felt like an extension of her body. She remembered times when the work was hard but meaningful, times when she felt grounded, even proud. Those moments hadn't disappeared just because things became heavy later. She realized she had been carrying blame for a long time. Blame for things that didn't turn out the way she hoped, for choices she made with the knowledge she had back then. She had convinced herself that leaving would erase that blame. It hadn't. The road taught her something important. Movement alone doesn't heal. Change without understanding only delays the truth. As she prepared to move again, she did so with a different mindset. Not running. Not chasing relief. Just listening. She didn't know what she would do next. She didn't know if she would go back or keep going. But for the first time since leaving, she felt closer to honesty than escape. The town was far behind her now, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like an unanswered question. One she wasn't ready to solve yet, but no longer afraid to face. And as the night grew quiet around her, she understood something simple and unsettling. Running had shown her many roads. She stayed longer in one place than she meant to. It was a quiet town, not too different from the one she left, but without the weight of memory. The streets were unfamiliar, which gave her a strange sense of rest. For the first time since leaving, she was not rushing. She rented a small room, unpacked her suitcase fully, and told herself she would stay for a few days. Those few days turned into more. Each morning she woke early, just as she always had. Her body remembered the rhythm even when her life no longer followed it. She made coffee, sat by the window, and watched people begin their day. They walked with purpose, carrying their own stories she would never know. Watching them made her think about her own life in a way she hadn't allowed herself to before. With no ranch to run and no town watching her, she had time. Too much time, maybe. At first it made her restless. Then slowly it made her honest. She began writing things down. Not plans or lists, but thoughts. Feelings she had buried under work and responsibility. She wrote about being tired long before she admitted it. About carrying expectations that were never spoken but always felt. About how strong she was expected to be, even when she didn't feel strong at all. She realized she had never given herself permission to struggle. Everyone saw her as capable, steady, dependable. She had learned to live up to that image, even when it hurt. Leaving the town had been her way of putting the weight down, even if only for a moment. One afternoon, she walked past a small ranch outside town. It wasn't large, but it was alive with activity. Someone was repairing a fence, moving with calm focus. The sight stopped her. She stood there longer than she planned, watching the simple work she knew so well. Instead of pain, she felt a quiet pull. The realization surprised her. She missed the work, not the pressure, not the expectations, but the connection. The feeling of knowing exactly where she belonged at the start of a day. The sense of purpose that came from caring for something bigger than herself. That evening she sat alone again, the notebook open on her lap. She wrote about the fear she hadn't named before. Not fear of the town, but fear of staying and admitting she needed change. Fear of asking for help. Fear of reshaping a life she had built around survival instead of peace. She thought about the older rancher, about his calm voice and steady eyes, about the way he never told her what to do, only asked her to understand herself first. His words returned, not as pressure, but as guidance. Home is where you stop fighting who you are. She finally understood what she had been avoiding. She wasn't angry at the town. She was angry at herself for believing she had to endure everything alone. She had turned strength into silence and responsibility into isolation. Once she saw that clearly, something inside her softened. She didn't decide to return right away. Instead, she began imagining what returning could look like if it wasn't about surrender. What if going back didn't mean repeating the same patterns? What if home could change because she changed? She thought about boundaries she never set, about conversations she avoided, about the parts of herself she locked away just to keep going. Those things weren't tied to a place. They were tied to choices she could now make differently. Days later, she visited the ranch again. This time, she spoke with the owner. They talked about land, weather, and work. Simple things, familiar things. For the first time in weeks, she felt fully present. The owner asked where she was from, and she answered honestly. She didn't shrink the truth or rush past it. "I run a ranch," she said, and this time the words felt real. That night, she lay awake, but not restless. Her thoughts were steady, clear. She knew now that leaving had served a purpose. It had shown her what silence sounded like, what loneliness felt like without distraction, what parts of herself she had ignored while staying busy. She realized she hadn't failed by leaving. She had learned. The next morning, she made a decision, not driven by escape or guilt, but by understanding. She would go back, not to prove anything, not to fix everything at once, but to face her life with honesty instead of endurance. The drive back felt different. The road no longer felt like a promise or a burden. It felt like a bridge. As familiar signs appeared, her chest tightened, but she didn't turn away from the feeling. She let it exist without letting it control her. When the town finally came into view, it looked the same as ever. Quiet. Steady. Waiting. She didn't rush home. She stopped at the edge of town and sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. She wasn't the same person who left. She carried less anger now, less blame, more clarity. When she pulled onto the road toward the ranch, she noticed things she had stopped seeing before. The way the land opened wide, the way the sky seemed to stretch endlessly. These things hadn't trapped her. They had held her. The ranch greeted her in silence. Fences stood where they always had. The house waited, patient and unchanged. She stepped out of the truck and took a deep breath. Instead of heaviness, she felt grounding. She walked the land slowly, not as someone trapped by duty, but as someone choosing to be present. She placed her hand on the familiar fence again, just as she had before leaving. This time, she didn't rush away from the feeling. She knew things would not suddenly be easy. Understanding didn't erase responsibility, but it gave her choice. And choice changed everything. That evening, as the sun dipped low, she stood outside and watched the light settle across the fields. The town was still there. The work was still there. But so was she, whole, aware, and no longer running. She had gone looking for freedom on the road. What she found instead was truth. And truth, she now understood, was the first step toward making home something she could finally rest inside. The morning light came softly, spreading across the land like a quiet promise. She woke early, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. For the first time in a long while, the day did not feel heavy before it even began. She stepped outside and let the cool air settle around her. The ranch was waking up, just like it always had, but something inside her had changed. She moved through her tasks with calm focus, feeding the animals, checking the fences, walking the familiar paths. The work was the same, yet it felt different. She wasn't rushing through it or carrying resentment with each step. She was present. Each movement felt chosen, not forced. As the days passed, she began making small changes, not the kind that turned life upside down, but the kind that slowly shifted its direction. She adjusted her schedule so she wasn't working until exhaustion. She allowed herself to rest without guilt. When something felt too heavy, she didn't push it aside. She paused and acknowledged it. The town noticed. People greeted her the same way, but she responded differently. She didn't hide behind short answers or forced smiles. She spoke honestly, calmly, and without apology. Some conversations felt awkward at first, but they also felt real. She realized how much energy she had spent protecting herself instead of connecting her. One afternoon, she saw the older rancher again. He stood near the same fence, hat low, eyes steady. This time, she walked toward him instead of driving past. "You came back," he said, not surprised. "I did," she replied. They stood side by side, looking out across the land. The silence between them felt comfortable, filled with understanding instead of tension. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "I found what I was avoiding." He nodded. "That's usually how it works." She smiled softly. "You were right." He didn't respond right away. Then he said, "No, you were ready." The words stayed with her long after they parted. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still long days, still challenges, still moments when old doubts tried to return, but now she recognized them for what they were. Signals, not commands. She listened instead of reacting. She began rebuilding her relationship with the ranch itself. She hired help when she needed it, something she had resisted before. She asked questions. She made plans that looked beyond survival. The land responded, not because it changed, but because she did. She also allowed herself to reconnect with people she had kept at a distance. Simple conversations turned into shared moments. Shared moments turned into trust. She learned that strength didn't mean doing everything alone. It meant knowing when to let others in. At night, she still stood on the porch sometimes, watching the sky. But the thoughts that came now were gentler. She no longer asked how to escape. She asked how to grow. She thought about the road she took and the places she saw, about the silence that forced her to listen. She was grateful for that journey, even the uncomfortable parts. Leaving had taught her the value of staying with intention. One evening, as the sun set low, she walked along the fence line again. The same fence, the same land, but her steps were steady, not restless. She placed her hand on the wood and felt the solidness of it beneath her palm. Home, she realized, was not something that trapped her. It was something she chose. She understood now that home was built from honesty, acceptance, and the courage to face yourself fully. It was shaped by the way you live inside it, not by its size or its history. The town still held memories, good and bad, but they no longer controlled her. They were part of her story, not the definition of it. As the sky darkened, she felt a deep sense of peace settle in. Not excitement, not relief, peace, the kind that comes from knowing where you stand and why. She went inside and closed the door behind her, not to shut the world out, but to rest within it. The road would always be there. Other places would always exist. But she no longer believed that distance was the answer to feeling free. She had learned something simple and lasting. Running had helped her see the truth, but understanding had brought her home. And for the first time, she wasn't staying because she had to. She was staying because she knew what home truly was.